Hello everyone. Today I'm looking at Riven. I'll be upfront about this one. I really don't like this game. I really do not like Riven. I kind of went in this with expectations of a whole, atmospheric, interesting, dynamic, abstract, puzzle solving, desert island, weird purgatory-esque experience. And that's not what I got. I mean, I got most of that. I mean, the island's design and aesthetics, and for reference, I'm playing the original 97 version with all the original graphical styles. I also did try the new one, but on the original, I really don't like how this game handles puzzles, because there are a lot of puzzles that are basically unsolvable, and there's kind of an overarching theme of one giant puzzle that is only solvable at the end of the game by combining everything else. So it's really not as much as I mean, it is a puzzle game, but there's literally one giant big puzzle, maybe two, really. But for the most part, it's exploring. It's okay, yeah, there's this part where you do the switches at the beginning, and then you have, the little pump at the end or the telescope thing. And yeah, you do have, smaller puzzles, but I don't know, those were like okay, they're fine, but there are multiple puzzles you come across in this game that you simply are not supposed to do until the very end, and it's very, I don't know, I found it very frustrating, very just not fun of an experience. I did really like the environments though, and there were certain places where, again, I like there's that one area with the firewood and whatever, and that area, I don't think that's even important or relevant to anything, but you can zoom in on these things. There's a lot of objects in the game that you can zoom in on for no discernible reason. It looks like they're interactable or points of interest, but they're honestly not. Like the workshop where you find the book, which has a lot of important information in it. There's a bunch of things you can examine on the table that do absolutely nothing. It was extremely frustrating. That's another thing about the book, the dialogue, even the characters in the cutscenes. At the beginning of the game, you have these cutscenes, these live action ish cutscenes of the characters in the environment, very retro, very 90s. I appreciate it. I like the style and aesthetic of it. However, to that point, those cutscenes, there's a good chunk near the beginning and then nothing in the middle, and then suddenly they come out at the end. Similar to the books are too long. There is so much information in the books, and they're written in this cursive, which honestly I was surprised I was actually able to read very fluidly. But even despite that, the books themselves, you're going through the environment, you're puzzle solving, and suddenly you have a book that is probably, I don't know, 20 pages long or something. You suddenly have to do all this reading, and like it's not really a problem, but it made me realize from a game design standpoint, you don't want to overload the player with a bunch of stuff all at once. You don't want to do 5 minutes of puzzle solving, and then an hour of exploration, and then an hour of reading, and then an hour of this. No, you want to combine all the elements and balance them out. So that's the biggest thing that I think I have a problem with Riven, is that in between exploration, discovery, lore, and cutscenes, they are grossly unbalanced. Even near the end of the game, you finally meet really the main antagonist, Gent, and he's lore dumping on Atius and all the other characters and Catherine and what exactly is going on. It feels like 80 to 90% of the cutscenes of this game are in the last hour or so. And suddenly you have all this development, all these characters, and like, oh, this is really cool. And then some of these cutscenes, they feel like they drag on too long. It felt like I was watching some kind of Saturday morning cartoon or TV show or something, some budget sci-fi thing, which again is fine. I like that vibe and the aesthetic, but it had been completely absent up until that point. So Riven was a very strange experience for me. I know there's a lot of it. It's a sequel to Myst, and so it's kind of implied you kind of had to play the first game to really appreciate this one. But even so, this is the one that people were always praising, and the one that aesthetically looked really super interesting to me. The front cover of Riven has always been a really cool design, and I've always wanted to say, what is that? And honestly, I kind of wish I never played this game, because whatever I had in my imagination was much better than what the game is in actuality and in theory and in reality. Um, Again, it's just frustrating. There are all these clues around the map that are so, how do I say, so common, so many of them, that are not about a single localized problem, but they're part of an overarching problem. And I will give credit where credit is due, that the overarching problem of relating the eye symbols to the colors, to the location of the eye domes, and the eye shapes and designs. You're basically taking 4 different sets of data scattered throughout the game and essentially combining them. Oh yeah, and the underground colored light area. So really, you're taking 5 sets of data and cross-referencing them with each other, similar to like a Rosetta Stone kind of idea, where you have a bunch of languages that are all running in parallel, and some of them cross over, and you can infer which ones are reliant on which. And I actually really like that. I mean, it was a very cool puzzle. It just feels like such a giant letdown in a way that is like it's the puzzle. Like there are other puzzles in the game, sure, but they're relatively easy, and it feels like the whole game is set up just for this one big puzzle. And in most cases, I like that kind of thing, but when you have nothing else to back it up, when it's, for example, another game I'm thinking of right now is Tunic, and even though it has this one giant world puzzle that has to take into account of everything you've done and all the things you've seen, it's actually optional, but it's still very fun to discover it. But the thing is, that's not the only content of the game. There's plenty of other combat and other mini puzzles that are just scattered and peppered throughout the world. So the fact that Riven feels like it's basically designed around one giant puzzle feels like a very kind of frustrating experience. It feels kind of hollow, and in that sense, I mean, it did get me. I mean, it is a hard puzzle because you have to write down things, but it's understandable. It gives you enough pieces, and it rewards you if you paid attention and written things down, which you, frankly, if you've played this game, you really should write things down as you're playing. And I just started up a paint document, just being like, okay, well, I just have to cross-reference this one symbol that it means this later. And then I did another symbol. Soon enough, I was doing the whole thing. The other thing that was also interesting is that having a visual guide, I had to look up a guide at some point, and this guy doing the whole process with the symbols. And that really helped me. And because the biggest problem I have with these point-and-click games is, oh, there was a switch there, or the sun comes out through my window and I don't realize, oh, there's actually a lever there I can pull. That happened to me about 5 times in this run, where there's supposed to be an obvious lever or an obvious switch somewhere in front of my face that I just keep missing. And having a visual guide and see, because the thinking, okay, I've solved the puzzle, I should be able to continue. What's wrong? What am I doing? And I see the guy push some button that is in the far off corner, and I realize, oh my god, it's the frustrating moment of realizing you have done nothing wrong, you just had to press the final switch. Speaking of which, this final puzzle, which is a giant colored marble grid location puzzle. I mean, again, it's really cool, and I like how the island is set up so that the island where you go to look at the graph and diagram. I remember I was rendering all the locations. I thought, oh, this is really cool, and I do like the fact that it goes from, oh, this is a cool simulation thing, to realize, oh wait, this is actually part of a puzzle. And then I look closely and I realized, wait a second, okay, I can sort of figure out where the domes are, but it's not exact. And I realized, wait a second, there are red lines on this grid, and slowly realize, oh, I can get exactly accurate. And the only issue is that fast traveling between the two places, which was a bonus and a negative. The one thing I do honestly I think my takeaway from Riven that I really, really, really enjoy is the fact it is point and click travel. I can't tell you how many times in a normal game when I've had to backtrack to somewhere and I have to manually walk through that area. It feels really, really tedious. But here, I just got really good at clicking real fast, and that was really, really enjoyable to be able to just. I love that aspect of I guess it would be exploration, where you end up solving a puzzle and linking one area to another area, and suddenly, oh, this giant path I was on links back to the beginning, and I have this breath of relief, like, oh, okay, everything makes sense now. And if I need to go back and check something, be like, oh, that was cool and interesting, and investigate it, I can do that very easily now instead of having this whole giant trip. There are some things though that were very unintuitive. For example, the schoolhouse, where they teach you the runes and counting. That one I really didn't like because, well, I had to go back and find it. I went through the whole game and I realized I had missed that location because I thought you unlock the submarine and you figure out how to navigate it. I thought the whole point of that submarine was to go to the essentially the pulley system that brings you up to the top area, and then you can take the ladder down. And I thought, well, maybe there's something else back there, but it's probably some optional other, thing. No, it's actually game mission critical that you find the schoolhouse. And in fact, in the remake of Ribbon, the schoolhouse is on the way to that area, so you can't miss it. So it forces you to go there because, yeah, it is so important. And in that, it's also interesting because that's the other kind of second major puzzle where it's giving you all of the numbered glyphs and is teaching you how they count in that language. And I did think it was actually very cool how they did that in the lore building, where they had this, I know it reminded me of Planet of the Apes for some reason, all the technology in that room, all these spheres and weird holograms and cranks and whatever. But I like how it taught you using the little whale mini game, and it was because it's very intuitive. It teaches you very, very quickly, and you realize, oh wait, it only went down one. This one went down a bunch of times. You start counting. Oh, that's 9. That's 10. You realize you get base 10, or rather base 5. And if you actually write the numbers out, as the game doesn't tell you, but you should anyway, you begin realizing the pattern. And thank goodness, again, I had this guide, so I had to know that there is a pattern to these glyphs. And once I recognized the pattern, I was like, oh, okay, cool. They never told us what 25 looked like, though, which is interesting. I imagine it'd be, I don't know, an X or something. It could have been anything, but it is interesting how you just have that pattern, and it just represents itself. I think there might have been better if, in a perfect world, I would have had the chalkboard to be interactable, so it encourages the player to be like, hey, you can write stuff down in this room. You might want to write down what all these glyphs mean. I think that would be a pretty cool mechanic to have added to the new game. I don't think they added it. They're just like, in fact, you could interact with like this piece of paper that's their alphabet rather than their numerical system, and I found that to be very misleading because you have nothing to do with their alphabet at all. There's no reason to learn their alphabet, but I digress. They let you interact with it anyway. Again, all the little I don't know what you call them, CG cutscenes, everything feels very I don't know what style you call this, pre-rendered environments and cutscenes. I really like them. They were very, very cool every time. I love taking the minecart. That was probably my favorite one, where it's like, oh, this is really cool. Imagine playing this in like 97. It would be really, really neat. It's still really cool now, and graphically just very, very nice, very cool. Again, there are just some switches and some puzzles that do not jump out of the environment, and I would forget that certain switches were there or certain switches were on the wall, and it's just very frustrating. But once you know where everything is, it's pretty intuitive. What I really do like about the game is that there are no tutorials, there are no hints. It's like, okay, here are once you know what all the things you can press, then you just start messing around with it until you figure out what does what. And I really enjoyed that. I think my favorite puzzle actually was the pump puzzle when you arrive on that island, and just figuring out, okay, this pump does this, this turns off the pressure, this boils the water or pressurizes the door. This does this, this lowers this, and then you figure out the right combination. You're like, oh, okay, cool. The worst puzzle, and I think it's fine they kept this in the remake, but the worst puzzle by far is the door puzzle. And it's not really a puzzle, it's a way to say F you to the player, where you go into a room, you go and explore it, and you turn back, but instead of exiting the room, you close the door, because when you close the door, there are two passageways that the door frame is actually covering when it's open inwardly. So you have to close it from the inside to reveal like the second half of the map. And I would have never have got at that. It's one of those frustrating puzzles. So again, Riven, I had very high expectations for its puzzle system and design, and yes, I did enjoy that giant puzzle, but there was not a lot else there, and a lot of the other puzzles were just frustrating time wasters or unintuitive or some hidden switch or something else. I just did not really enjoy it. I enjoy games like Tunic and Zelda and other puzzle games, but as a pure puzzle game, I expected, I guess, a better quality of mini puzzles besides the main puzzle. I really do like the look of Riven, though, the style of it. I guess another weird letdown is the cover of Riven is this giant glowing orange dots on this giant gray-black orb made of ash or something, and in my mind I had all these ideas of what this thing was, like a living symbiote that was a fusion of a human brain and some alien entity or whatever, or maybe it was some kind of abstract god machine complex made of organic material that they were using to alter the universe. And it turns out it's just a town. Those are just people's, like, those are house lights inside a giant ball. That's all it is. I'm sorry, I'm incredibly let down by that. I don't care what anyone says. It was super lame that, like, oh, that's somebody's house. Basically, I was, come on, guys. The actual lore behind Riven is pretty interesting, though. However, it's pretty cool. It also feels, I know, very, like, again, Saturday morning TV 90s, where books have magic power. So you have a bunch of casters or wizards, or I don't know what you would call them exactly. I forget, I think they have a certain name, but they essentially have the power to write books that link people to new worlds and new ages. And so there are a few characters. There's, I think, Atreus or Teus, Catherine, and Ghent. And these three individuals are in a weird, struggle. One's in love with Catherine. Ghent is the father of Atreus. There's other characters. It's not told very super clear. Again, I would have loved to have more notes and things scattered throughout the world, more lore drops. But unfortunately, 90% of all the writing is in like 2 or 3 books at the end of the game, where it's just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. It's so tedious. And the cursive, it was cool. I don't think it would vibe with everyone, which is why they toned it back in the remake. I do actually appreciate that, though. Really hard to read things, but especially when it's not immediate or it's just for the purposes of lore, then it's kind of tedious to read through all that, I guess. I don't know. I would have preferred if it was of a different... I would have preferred if it would just scatter throughout the game. That you find someone's journal and realistically they're giving you their whole life story. You're reading for 5 minutes at least to 10 minutes on this one book, and it breaks up the gameplay flow like you wouldn't believe. And it's all in the last, again, like half hour of the game when you're getting all this stuff. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the Riven experience. I was expecting to like explore a desert island and find a weird statue and get a lore dump about it and slowly explain it. Another perfect example would be a game like Outer Wilds. That's a perfect puzzle discovery game where you're learning about the world, and through your knowledge of the world you're also solving puzzles and mini puzzles, and then they all lead to an overall puzzle that solves the entire universe. That's an example of a perfect puzzle game. So yeah, I was very, very dismayed by Riven. It might have been very impressive for the time, but it's very mid by today's standards. I'll be honest. And I was, oh wait, it's a sequel to Mist. Maybe I should play Mist now. I'm not playing Mist. I was very disappointed with Riven. It was not what I expected or wanted, and games have just come a long way. It does have a graphical style that's nice, but speaking of that, let's talk about the remake. So this came bundled, I guess, with the game. I had no idea, but I bought Riven, and then I got also the Riven like remake and 97 version. I just bought Riven. I got both anyway. So the first the first thing you'll notice is that this is running on Unreal Engine, as it says with the big logo when you open it up, and it's very obvious. Everything is very Unreal looking with the lighting and the textures. It's very cool. You come to know. It still looks pretty nice though, especially the water, the waves, the background. They look a little bit more dynamic. So even in Unreal, Riven looks really, really good. The big surprising thing to me, though, is that in Riven, the puzzles have been changed quite a bit. So I'm trying to think of a basic one. Like you think even, the funniest one was when you find the first Steam puzzle, where in the original, and this got me, was very stupid that I missed this in the first area, that if you don't do the first rotating door puzzle, which is pretty confusing, so I skipped it and I went somewhere else. If you don't do that puzzle, you don't turn on the steam to the pipes, so that later on in the game you can activate the drawbridge. And in order to get to that place, you have to go through the minecart to the island, past the hidden doors, along the coastline, and all the way to the end of that giant catwalk to press a switch to find out whether or not it works or not. And then you have to find your way all the way back. I didn't even realize you could get back to the original island. I thought you were stuck there, and that was the way back. And again, thank God I had a guide to tell me that to do that. I thought I had to go back to, and that's the other thing, I thought I had to go back to the beginning of that island where there was a pump pumping like steam or air or pressure into things. I didn't know exactly what. And I thought that would have activated the drawbridge or the drop bridge. And no, you had to go back to the very beginning of the game. That is major backtracking. That is stupid. That is dumb. And so in the remake, what happens is if you activate the exact same Steam switch, it actually destroys the bridge. And I thought, okay, I think that was supposed to happen. And I think it was, because there were gaps in it, so you couldn't use it anyway. Yeah, man. And then there were just generally I think the other major puzzle in the original Riven was the animal pedestal puzzle. I don't think that was too bad, because you did have to think, okay, what are the animals I've encountered? I've encountered the beetle, the wark or the whale or whatever, the Loch Ness monster things, the frog that you catch, and finally the fish, which is just a symbol. And technically there are fish, but you just never really see them. And so those are the 5 animals that you find in that zone. So it's like, okay, that's understandable. That's somewhat solvable, I guess. The frog one, though, was very odd because you have to place it in the thing. And I thought as a trap, and I was really confused because I didn't realize it was going to the water. I thought this was some weird coal or diamond processing plant where we took a piece of coal and put it in a container and went into some smelter or some kind of pressurized chamber that turned it into a diamond. That's literally what I thought we were doing. So it was very not well communicated to me what was going on. I do appreciate at least that the dome puzzles allowed you to like mash the button so it would stop in exactly the right symbol. And yeah, and I thought the book linking technology was actually really cool. The fact that you could look at a picture in a book that represents that book and then travel to that time or that space was really, really. Other things, and so I played a lot more in the remake than I thought. I just kind of got to the halfway point where I just tried to speedrun it, like, oh, I remember where this was and where this was. But yeah, the map is very surprisingly different. I think it is worth playing if you're a fan of the original Riven, because they made things, I think, simpler in some ways, but also just different. You know, there's this one area where in the starting spot you can essentially go by this cliff and look down, and now in the remake there's actually a pathway there. So there's some pathways you go on that you know, oh, this leads to this area, or this leads down to, you know, the laboratory, and suddenly it's a winding cave, and it's like, oh wow, this is actually totally different now, and it's very interesting to see that, I guess, what they've done with it. So yeah, if you're a fan of the original Riven, I guess try the remake or the remaster. If you're asking me for a first-time player, what should you do? It's hard to say. I mean, I'm honestly, I'm more of a fan of the original Riven, even though it's more convoluted, simply because of it. The style is more interesting. The worst thing about the remake is honestly the character models. Instead of having live actors and like a sprite-based or pre-rendered style, a lot of the actors are now just CG, or just no Unreal Engine models, and they look like Fortnite characters. They don't look very good. But the environment's really nice in the new one, I have to admit. If I were to recommend to a new player what they should play, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. If you're going into Riven, expect a difficult or frustrating puzzle game, honestly. But it's still kind of rewarding, so I can't help. Like, it's still kind of worth recommending, I guess, in some way. It's just very indirect with how it tells the player certain things. Again, one thing I do like about the original is there's a lot of stuff you can skip. So, for example, traveling between islands is an animation. So if you just smash the escape key, you can skip that entire sequence. It's essentially the equivalent of fast traveling in older games, and it's very, very good slash useful. And I was modern games that I realized I wish I could do that there, where I could be like, hey, I know where I have to go. I don't want to maybe fast travel all the way there. I might want to go halfway. Is there a way I could jump 10 paces in front of me? It's like fast mode. And I've talked about this in other videos where I really think fast mode would be a really cool thing. I once accidentally overclocked Mother 3 in emulator, and I really, really enjoyed it because it was great for grinding. It's like I need to go into the battle, get out of the battle, auto attack because I'm so strong, get the XP, and keep going. And I think an equivalent of like jumping forward in the game world, or jumping the game's in-game clock forward, would be really, really cool. The other thing I like about the new Riven is that, how do I say this? Essentially, well, I don't like this, I guess, but it was interesting how, yeah, no, I guess I didn't like this, how they kind of spoiled the ending in a way, or the big reveal, which is that where Riven was. Riven is just a plane floating out in the middle of space. It is just surrounded by stars. And so you don't realize this until the very end of the game, when it zooms out and goes through the giant crack in the world. And what essentially occurs is that in the remake, when you go, you can actually go inside the pods. There's no puzzle for solving the pods, so there's no rune puzzle, which is like, okay, so that's out of the question. Which makes me wonder, why would they even bother having a schoolyard or a school in that case, if you don't need that information to solve that puzzle? In any case, so you just open up the domes basically by, again, mashing the button. You go inside, and inside the dome, it's not a book that teleports you. It's actually just open space. It's like a wormhole that brings you to this catwalk in the middle of space, where you can see the other domes that are peeking through reality, essentially. And so it kind of shows you, oh, Riven's actually this place that is actually already in space. So it's kind of just telling you right out there, which I wasn't really a fan of. Another thing too is the colored marble puzzle was very frustrating, because I can't remember exactly where, because it's very unintuitive that this is the thing that powers the books inside the domes, like it's not very well communicated at all. And I didn't realize it. In fact, I didn't realize it because I went to the domes. I had solved the puzzle. I went to the domes and checked the books, and none of them were working. And I thought, okay, do I have to go to the the animal puzzle or this? There's like three main puzzles in the game. That's really what this game is, like three puzzles. And so I had to go all the way back to the marble puzzle and realize I didn't click the white button on the switch to lock it in place or power it. Because otherwise, if you got the combination wrong, the thing just would come off or wouldn't work. It was so frustrating. I had solved the puzzle correctly. I just had forgotten. You have to click the switch to put the thing down on top of it, and then you have to click a button on that same switch, which is unintuitive as hell, to then turn it on essentially. And this is not really communicated anywhere. There's a book that says, oh yeah, there's a color thing that powers the domes or something. It really powers the books inside the domes. It's very convoluted. It's very stupid. And honestly, it's more frustrating than it is fun. I did have some fun, obviously, playing this game since I beat it, but I really just can't recommend it. But yeah, that's Riven. Not a great experience, honestly. I mean, I guess I play it for some insight. I might check out the new one. They probably made the puzzles a lot more intuitive. They made the map a lot more easier to navigate. I still don't like the fact that you have to ride in the machine every time you want to go somewhere, and because you do have to do a lot of backtracking. If that backtracking is still in the remake, and you have to go and sit in that machine instead of skipping that 10-second segment, that would be torture to me. But yeah, that's basically Riven. I had an idea of this game in my head, and actually playing it became something much different and much weirder, and something much more unappealing, I suppose. But I played it, and it's like, okay, I thought I was a puzzle game guy, and I have to say, Riven, even though it's praised as one of the best point-and-click puzzle games, I didn't enjoy it. I don't think it was a good puzzle game, and I just didn't like it. I mean, not like I hated it, but you know, this is where I'm coming from. I'm in the halfway point where I wish I could like this game more than I did, but the idea I've had of this game than actually playing it is much better. I would have preferred to not play this game and just have it as this weird, mystical, cool 90s game that, you know, I wouldn't have any understanding of. That would have been better. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. I obviously more complaints than compliments, and that's just how it is. Anyway, guys, that's Riven, and yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.